Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast, where it's all about turning your job search into a slam dunk. Your host is Angela Copeland.
Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Angela Copeland. Live on the phone with me today, I have Alex Smith in Memphis, Tennessee. Alex is the Chief HR Officer for the City of Memphis. She's also served on the HR teams at Brightstar Device Protection, Target Corporation, and Microsoft. Alex will also be speaking this year at a South by Southwest panel called Dear HR, Ditch the Pool Table and Pay Student Loans. Alex, thanks for joining me today.
Absolutely. Happy to join you.
Well, I'm so excited. I was really excited to see there was going to be someone else from Memphis at South by Southwest, especially speaking on such a cool panel. I'm curious, your topic is ditch the pool table and pay for student loans. It's such an interesting topic. What types of student loans benefits are different companies offering, and what are you seeing here at the City of Memphis?
So at the City of Memphis, we are a municipal government entity. We're actually the first public sector entity to offer a student loan contribution program, and we have chosen to partner with Tuition.io for our program. For our program specifically, and in other entities, I know, for example, Live Nation and other organizations are doing this as well, is we are actually helping to pay down the principal of student loans for our employees. And so what that looks like is that we have a program where our employees can register their student loans with our partner. And of course, they still have to make their monthly payments, but we make a monthly contribution towards their student loans, towards the principal to help pay down their debt. And for us, the City of Memphis, that's $50 a month. I know other entities have various amounts that they contribute, but so far we've seen this as being a very well-received and greatly appreciated program. And on top of that, we're seeing some really positive employee engagement and retention from offering this program, so we're really excited about it.
Oh, that's cool. So this is a little different than when you pay for someone to go to take a class while they're working for you, right? They've already gone to school, they've graduated, they've come to you with a student loan. Is that right?
That's correct. So we offer a tuition reimbursement program, just typically what you would see with an employer where you have decided you want to go back to school and you register for classes, and after you receive your grade for the class, you can get reimbursed for your school expenses. And for us, we offer $2,000 for certifications and $3,000 annually for degrees through our tuition reimbursement program. But this is separate and different. So this is for someone who's already gone to school and accumulated student loan debt and is looking for some additional support. We now offer this program to help that audience.
Wow, I like that. So it sounds like you're getting really positive feedback. Like from what you're seeing, why do you think, it's kind of obvious, but why do you think that employees really value this benefit?
Well, I think they really value it. One, because it shows that as an employer, we care about them and we acknowledge the financial stress that student loans have on an individual and on a family. And particularly, for our demographic, we're hiring several millennials and younger people into police and fire and some of our other corporate-like divisions as well. And so these individuals are coming to us with student loan debt. And so they appreciate us working with them, if you will, to help alleviate some of their debt and helping them get their financial house in order. And so it's been very greatly received. And I know that there are employees that are excited about it because it now gives them the opportunity to save more. I've heard people talk about being able to be in a position to buy a home and other things. And so we see this as a wonderful financial wellness tool.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. It feels like, people who, say maybe my parents' age, when they went through college, they could kind of pay for it as they went. Like they didn't end up with quite as many student loans, it didn't seem like, but it feels like college has really increased in terms of the cost. is there a reason? I mean, have you looked into sort of like why is it that people have so many more student loans than maybe they did in the past? Or is that, I mean, do you see a difference at all?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would say we know that the cost of higher education has increased across the country. And we know just in Memphis alone, I believe the student loan rate has increased by 6% year over year in our area. And so it is something that is truly a phenomenon. We also know that from a sector standpoint, more and more people are needing to have a college education for employment opportunities. And so, the combination of the cost going up and the demand going up, it means, the financial burden on the individual goes up. And so we recognize that. And so that's why investing in this program was really important to us.
Yeah, that's a really good point, is that you are being required to have a college degree for a job that maybe in the past you were not required to have a college degree for. That is such a good point. Do you think there are other benefits that employers should be paying attention to that employees do value? Like, are there other things that we're not thinking of that are kind of on the cutting edge?
Well, that's a great question. I think that, in the spirit of wellness, there are a lot of interesting benefits that are coming up or innovative ideas coming up about how the employer can help with that. So everything from, having on-site gyms or on-site daycare centers, looking at work-life balance type of options. You're seeing a lot of really interesting different benefits that are coming from particularly the private sector to be able to attract and basically help employees have a good work-life balance and have overall positive well-being.
Mm-hmm. I like that a lot. I also like some of the things I'm seeing sort of in the technology sector, and they seem to be really out kind of on the edge of it, but things that are maybe around fertility or some sort of family planning kinds of issues that can be tricky, where they're kind of stepping up to the table and they're helping employees financially. I kind of think that's super cool, but I'm sure that that's probably so expensive that not every organization could even consider such a benefit.
That's correct. And of course, we love to look at the high-tech sector. In fact, I worked in the high-tech sector for a while, and it's amazing some of the things that they're offering in terms of family support, things like backup care programs, as well as the fertility support programs that they're offering are very, very interesting, as well as, small things like having nap pods and, yoga classes available. Those are very interesting ideas in terms of thinking about overall employee well-being and how you can support that for your employee base.
Yeah, I think those are really good points. It's funny, I studied engineering in college, and when I came out and any company that was offering something like an area where you could take a nap, I would think, this seems kind of cool, but I'm afraid maybe they're going to try to trap me here. Mm-hmm. Like in terms of, it just felt like they were looking for more hours. But the thing that you mentioned that's super interesting, so you work for the City of Memphis now, so you've worked for government, but you've also worked, like we talked about, for large corporations. And I do talk to tons of job seekers who are interested to sort of transition between sectors, and they've only seen sort of one side and not the other. You've kind of seen both. Like, what do you think are some of the differences in the two, big corporation versus government? What, from a work perspective?
Well, great question. I think, first of all, money is one of the big differences between the two. So, in the private sector, particularly if you're working for a publicly traded company, and they offer not only, salary, but they offer bonuses, they offer stock options or stock awards and things of that nature. When you're in the public sector, those type of incentives are just not available. And so when you come into particularly a government role, you really have to have a heart for service and be thinking about how you can contribute and how you can benefit from contributing to the greater good of the organization that you're working for. So I think the intent is a little bit different. In the private sector, you're worried about shareholder value and return on investment. In government, you're also worried about return on investment, but you're also looking at citizen value and how your organization can provide the right level of services and support to the citizens and the taxpayers that are contributing to the government entity. So that in itself, kind of foundationally, are two very different pieces to it. There's also, just from a career standpoint, sometimes you can have a little bit more flexibility in the different types of roles that you can do in the private sector because you have a slightly higher attrition rate. However, in the public sector, there tends to be a lower attrition, and so you don't see as much movement, if you will, in between different roles. Mm-hmm. And so what ends up happening is a lot more stretch assignments or stretch projects where you're participating more cross-group collaboration type options versus just flat out getting a promotion, consistently every year, which could happen in the private sector.
Oh, that's interesting. So you're saying that basically in the government sector, people maybe tend to stay in the jobs a little bit longer. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Oh, that's super interesting. Mm-hmm.
So for the City of Memphis, the average tenure is anywhere between 11 and 13 years of service. Whereas, you go to some high-tech companies, the average tenure is like 24 months.
Yeah.
So that in itself, just the nature of the entity and how employees may behave in the entity can change, the career opportunities and how you would think about that for that organization.
That's so interesting. That is really interesting. Well, you also mentioned that the pay is a big difference. I'm curious, I think I know the answer to this, but if we're interested in a job that's for a government organization, it seems like the pay for the job, or at least the pay scale, is usually available somewhere online. Does that seem right?
Yeah, that's true. So typically, especially in the state of Tennessee with our open records law, different states have different open records, but I know within the state of Tennessee, in particular the City of Memphis, our salaries are published. And people know, what people are making. Like I mentioned before, the main difference between the compensation, if you think about total cash compensation between a government entity and a private sector entity, has really to do with the incentives. So mm-hmm. the salaries may be relatively similar for equitable jobs or similar jobs, but the main difference would be in the private sector you might get a 10 or 15% bonus. You might get, stock awards or stock options or other perks that go with that is difficult for you to get in the public sector. So that's where I would say you can see the difference between the two entities.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So you'd probably, if you were thinking of switching between them, you should really dig into those details.
Right.
Before you make a decision. Well, I'm sure you have people approach you who are trying to decide on public or private sector. Like, if somebody is sort of on the fence and not really sure, like, how do you advise them? Like, what should they think about when they're making that choice?
Well, I think first of all, you want to look at your career holistically. And, everyone's career is made up of different experiences and different steps that you've taken. And so you can, there's no kind of wrong answer. And honestly, you're not necessarily locked into one industry versus another. So I always encourage people, if you've worked in private sector a long time, give public sector a try. And if you worked in public sector a long time, give private sector a try. There's nothing wrong with you gaining different types of experiences. I think that makes you holistically a better professional, and it also helps strengthen your skill set so that you are ready and available for different opportunities that may come your way. So I always encourage people to think holistically about their career and think about experiences. Mm-hmm. That's really what matters more than anything else. So working for a small company, a large company, a private sector, a public sector, all of those different things, I think, help to build your overall competence and, mm-hmm. and your skill set. The second piece I would say is, what really drives you? And for some people, having a mission and a vision and feeling that they're making a huge impact is important to them. And so you can really get that fulfilled in a lot of different ways. You know, I've known some people in the high-tech sector, they feel this tremendous sense of accomplishment and value from knowing that they're creating cutting-edge technology and helping to change the world with technology. Whereas I know other people where they get that sense of passion and value through knowing that they are making a difference in the community and making a difference for the people around them. That's an individual answer, but I think it's important for you to explore really what drives you and what your passion is, and to seek out experiences and opportunities that connect to that. I mean, hey, we all have to work, you know, and so if you're going to spend, 40 hours or 50 hours a week doing something, it should be something that you care about and something that you feel good about and something that you feel like you can make an impact on. And whether that is in the high tech or government or retail or whatever industry that is, I just encourage people to find the place where their passion is the most aligned.
Oh, I love that. Well, so it's such good advice. So say we've decided, that we maybe want to switch from private to public, and we're ready to apply and go through that application process. Since you've kind of seen both sides, what do you think are some of the biggest differences between applying for a job, sort of a government job versus a private industry sort of job? Like, is it the same? Are there like some notable differences?
Well, I think one notable difference, and I would say there are a lot of similarities. There are a lot of similarities between two. First of all, applying is important. And so whether you're private or public sector, you actually filling out their application, and typically it's an online application process, you want to do that. You also want to make sure that you are, have key experiences and key roles that match the minimum requirements for the position. And I would say for the public sector in particular, because of the civil service rules, it's important that you meet the minimum qualifications. So if it says, a bachelor's degree and 5 years of experience in, X industry, you want to make sure that that's clearly articulated in your resume and on your application. Otherwise, you will be screened out. And so for the private sector, that's very true too. But I would say the civil service requirements make that even more stringent for us on the public sector side. Also, there is a important piece around, just transparency. And so, from a public sector standpoint, there tends to be an over-index of documentation related to, the interview questions and the way that we go about it. You see that on the private sector side as well in terms of their compliance procedures, but it's particularly true for the public sector. And so I think, just being well prepared for your interviews and understanding behavioral-based interview questions is really important for success in an interview process. In both private and public sector, but particularly in the public sector.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
You mentioned something called civil service rules. And if we've never heard of that, what is a civil service rule?
Well, first of all, I encourage everyone to look it up. And it's something I had to really learn about. But in the government sector, in the federal, state, or local level, you have what they call civil service protection. And so essentially means that, and I know for us at the City of Memphis, it speaks to the need for us to have, number one, a competitive interview process. So it's difficult for us to just, place someone in a role. We have to have a competitive process for our hiring practices and a well-documented procedure and process around that. It also means that we have to go through progressive discipline if there is any kind of disciplinary action. And it means that if there is a termination, that an employee has civil service appeal rights for that, and they can appeal to a civil service commission or commissioner, I should say, related to those items. And so versus in the private sector, if you are terminated, you possibly have some remedy in terms of suing the company, if you will. But there's no civil service, there's no commissioner that you get to go to appeal that decision versus on the public sector side, there is that extra protection there.
Oh, I like that. I actually like that you mentioned that there's progressive discipline, because I've met so many people who work in the private sector who, have been fired for sort of no reason. And it sort of, they're walked out of the building one day, and it really wreaks havoc on their whole sort of life. And I always kind of wish, wow, if they'd kind of been given a heads up, maybe they could have prepared or made a change or something. So that's really cool that there's rules in place and that they're a little bit more clear. I like that. But I do coach people a lot to go around, like if they don't meet the minimum requirements, especially for like a private sector job, that, hey, just if you think you can do it, just apply. But it sounds like in the public sector, you can't do that quite so much.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And what about, so in the private sector, you can sometimes go around the hiring process a little bit and try, if like the hiring manager, for example, it's less critical maybe that you apply online and follow that process. It seems like, though, maybe on the public sector side, that applying online and going through the process and the steps as outlined is much more important. Is that true?
Yeah, I would say that's true, particularly for our civil service roles. Now, there are the notion of what we call appointed roles, and those typically are more senior level roles like myself and the chiefs and the directors, where you are employed at will and you serve at the pleasure of the mayor. Those roles don't have the same type of stringent civil service requirements. That being said, from an HR practice standpoint, I still believe it's important that people apply for roles and to make that available. However, different government entities consider what they call political appointees in different ways. And so there's not the same requirement there.
Okay, I'm glad that you clarified that, because I've actually met a couple of people who had sort of appointed roles that when the person who appointed them turned over and maybe someone else won an election, or I don't know exactly how it works, but they sort of lost their job along with the person who had appointed them. And I kind of wondered about that. So it sounds like there's maybe different rules that apply.
Yeah, so it's still essentially employment at will. So it's no different, if you work for a company and a new CEO came in and decided they wanted a different team, they would, hire the team that they wanted. It's no different on the government side where you have a mayor or an elected official where they decide they want to hire their team, and so they, let go of the current team and hire the team that they want. And so that it allows for that employment at will aspect for government leader or elected official leadership to be there.
Okay, that's really interesting. Well, so something that I noticed as I looked at your background and I was preparing for our talk today is that you have lived in a ton of different places, and just a couple were like Tennessee, Florida, Minnesota, Washington State, New Jersey. I think you've even lived in another country. So I'm curious, if we are kind of interested to look for a job in a city where we don't live and maybe we don't have a ton of contacts, do you have any tips for us on like things that we could do to try to transition to another city, and maybe what's helped you to transition to so many different places? Great
question. So I think first and foremost, LinkedIn and there's other social media platforms that are extremely helpful in facilitating that transition. So making sure that your social media presence is updated and your current resume information is up there is really important. I think secondly, networking. And so every new city that I've moved to, it all started with me networking with other people in that city who are currently employed and asking them, about what opportunities are around. Now, luckily, most organizations today have their jobs posted online, and so no matter where you are, you can look and see what's posted. Of course, if you have a network in that city, you can find out about roles that may be upcoming. And so it's good to network if you can, particularly with professional associations and other, kind of industry-related colleagues that you may know in that city. They can keep their ear to the ground and let you know about different opportunities that may be available. So to sum up, number one, social media presence. You want to be active on social media. You want to make sure you have your resume and your profile updated on those social media sites, and look for jobs online as well. And then number two is, start networking in the city that you want to move to, and look for particularly industry professionals, the industry associations that are located in that city, the local chapters that are there, to connect with people to find out about opportunities.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. It's super, super helpful because I know it's moving between cities can be really challenging, especially, if you don't have those contacts. Well, I have one last question because we were talking before we got started, and because your background is in HR, it sounds like you very frequently get a question from folks about, I'm interested to switch into HR from some other area, and I don't know what to do. Do you have just a top, one or two tips that you give people who are interested to make a transition like this?
Sure. So I have, essentially, three main things that I like to tell people. So first of all, find out exactly what HR is, and you'll be amazed how many people I talk to, and they say, "Oh, HR is payroll or HR is recruiting." And the truth is that HR has multiple functions within it, within the discipline, if you will. And so there's everything from diversity and inclusion, recruiting, organizational development, compensation, benefits, wellness, and so on and so forth. And so, I encourage people, first of all, if you're interested in human resources, really try to understand more about what the function is and what are the different pieces to it, so that you can, first of all, understand what area really interests you about it. And then two, my next recommendation after you've done some research on the function, number two is to talk to someone or who's currently in the function and ask, kind of realistic job preview questions about, how, what do they do every day? How does it work? What do they like about their job? What do they not like about their job? So that you can get a realistic perspective about how the human resources function works on a day-to-day basis, and either for your company or for other companies. And then number three, I encourage people to get some sort of HR experience. So after you've done some research about it and you talk to someone about it, it's nothing better than actually learning about it. And so volunteering is a great way for you to get exposure. And so, there are many nonprofits and other organizations that are looking for extra help in their HR space. And so that's a great way to kind of learn a little bit, is through volunteering. The second way is within your own company. You can also, if you will, volunteer to help out with certain HR-like events. So whether that's, onboarding or training or, participating in recruiting events. Take the opportunity, because every organization, particularly if you're a larger organization, has these type of HR functions where they could use a little help. And so get opportunity to really, volunteer and get a sense for really what people do and do some HR work real time. And then after you've kind of gone through those three steps, I would say, and you're really serious about making the transition, you understand it, you know what you would like to do, then my next recommendation is to, number one, look at maybe taking some coursework. Mm-hmm. And so most local universities have, some HR classes that you can take. And then lastly, of course, look to make that transition. And whether that's internally with your current company, which usually is making a lateral move internally is the easiest way to go. Mm-hmm. If not, looking for another opportunity. Now, you may have to take a pay cut sometimes to do that, just because you don't have as much experience in the HR field. But if you're really serious about it, and you're going to school for it as well, then making that transition and getting into a true HR role could be very beneficial for your long-term career prospects.
Oh, that's super helpful. I know there are tons of people with this question, and so I'm so glad that you were able to share that. Well, If we'd like to learn more about you, Alex, and more about the great work that you're doing with the City of Memphis, where would you recommend that we go?
Oh, great question. So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and so you can look for me. Consult with Alex Smith is one way to find me, or Alex Smith, Chief HR Officer for the City of Memphis. I'm on LinkedIn, and you can always message me there and look at some of my posts in terms of things that we're doing within the City of Memphis.
Oh, that's excellent. And for anybody who's going to be at South by Southwest in March, I would totally look up Alex's panel. It's on the workplace track, and it's called Dear HR, Ditch the Pool Table and Pay Student Loans. Well, Alex, thank you so much for joining me. This has been great.
Fantastic. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for listening. Thanks to those of you who sent me questions. You can send me your questions to Angela@CopelandCoaching.com. You can also send me questions via Twitter. I'm at Copeland Coach, and on Facebook, I'm Copeland Coaching. Don't forget to help me out. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts and leave me a review.
Thank you for listening to the Copeland Coaching Podcast today with your host, Angela Copeland. Tune in next time to get more great tips on turning your job search into a slam dunk.